Photography is an absolute obsession that sometimes I wish I could leave behind forever, but the next morning when I wake up, I'm really glad it's there. It's all those things. It's the reason for my existence at this point. Don't sleep, don't think about anything else. Forget about your girlfriend, forget about your boyfriend, forget about anything in your life other than that story for that time, because that's the kind of responsibility that they're really expecting from you.
Hi, today I'm really pleased to chat with Brent Stirton, who's worked with National Geographic magazine for the past 20 years, and he's a senior correspondent for Getty Images. He's received 13 awards from World Press Photo and 16 from the Pictures of the Year International Contest. On average, he travels to more than 15 countries per year, investigating social issues and concerns regarding sustainability. I'll sit down with him to discuss his photographic practice and how he juggles being a father and operating at the top of the journalistic profession. Perhaps just to start, maybe just talk a little bit about what your life is like as a photographer now.
Right now, it's my life as a photographer is trying to, achieve some balance between being a good dad and doing a decent job with my photography. That's really the bottom line for now. I'm still really lucky to be doing most of my work for National Geographic magazine. So that's been nearly 20 years now. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that. Getty's been very supportive of me working sort of at the intersection of the environment and humankind. So I still do a lot of work on sustainability, whether that's in conflict-related situations or whether it's in, looking at how we're going to manage our food going forward. Whatever it is, I seem to be more involved with planetary health these days than anything else. I was doing quite a lot of work for Newsweek at one point, when Newsweek and Time were, significant rivals, and that sort of news environment existed for those publications. And they sent me to Congo, to DR Congo in 2007. And the idea there was to photograph this group of specialized rangers who had received paramilitary training in South Africa and had received this training because there were, something like 11 paramilitary groups inside the park they were protecting. And then the Congolese army and then Rwandan forces. So myself and the bureau chief for Africa for Newsweek, Scott Johnson, we went and covered these guys. And 3 days into that work, we were a bunch of mountain gorillas were killed. And I didn't know anything about these animals at the time. But when those pictures were released, they got kind of an extraordinary response. And so for me, that was an indicator that this was another way maybe to talk about what was happening in DRC. Yeah, and then after that, Nick Nichols from National Geographic called me. Now, Nick is a guy, for people who don't know, I think Nick is probably the finest wildlife photographer we've ever had, and a very pioneering photographer in terms of his techniques, etc. So Nick asked me if I would want to do the investigation on what happened to those gorillas for National Geographic. And amazingly, that worked out. So there was a challenging one because they said we'll give you 12 weeks. So I thought that's a lot of time. And then they called me after 4 weeks and said, "Hey, we need it now. We're bringing it forward." So fortunately, I hadn't been sitting on my backside, and I had some pictures. So they went forward to that story early, but I still feel they owe me another 8 weeks.
Well, you've had 20 years.
Yeah, no. I think they might have made up for it. But yeah, that's the first time that I really started working on things that were more environmentally related. It's what I've come to realize since is that there are so many good photojournalists that are running around covering the more mainstream events, of our time. And I was doing okay there, but I didn't feel particularly useful. And in this sector, working environmentally, I do feel useful, and I do feel that I can, for want of a lesser cliche, shine a bit of a light on people who otherwise would not be getting any attention.
When we met, I think now probably 25 years ago for the first time in South Africa, you
Yeah,
were on quite a trajectory. You were very clear about where you
I had a
wanted to go.
plan.
Well, it seems from the outside, but perhaps take us through from the point that you were at university.
When I was studying, we were going through the end of apartheid, right? And your generation was doing a great job covering that. My generation was probably 5 years behind you. I was stringing for Reuters out of Natal at that time, and then I started working for a French agency called Gamma Liaison, and I was covering a lot of the factional violence in the north of Natal, so in Zululand. So it was quite challenging because I'd be up there working at night, trying to photograph early in the morning at some of those killing fields up there in places like Bombay and etc. You know, but I wasn't getting any play because the guys in Johannesburg got all the play. You know, so for me, I basically got impatient. I knew that it would be very difficult for me to get a job, an agency job in South Africa. That was basically a closed ship. So I developed these French contacts, and purely by coincidence, just meeting a couple of people. But at the same time, I was trying to make a living, so I couldn't make a living out of the news. So I was shooting all sorts of magazine stuff. I mean, listen, if I needed to shoot a wedding, I had no problem with that. Whatever allowed me to save money so that I could finance trips. That was the plan. I decided to go to New York because Gamma Liaison had an office in New York, and they said, look, if you can come over, we can't help you to do that, but we'll try and work with you if you come over. So I did, and then I just bothered them. I just pestered them. Basically, it was a campaign of harassment. Um, you know, but I managed to deliver a couple of stories which they seemed to like, and you know, yeah, I was fortunate to do well with a couple of awards. So yeah, Graham. I mean, honestly, I say this a lot, but I just feel like I've been very fortunate. There's a lot of very talented photographers out there, but it doesn't always work for them.
You spend so much time before an assignment thinking things through and being very clear about the type of work or the type of subjects that you're going to photograph.
Yeah, so I'm very research heavy. I just try and learn as much as I can before I go into the field. Which is often the opposite of the news scenario where you're basically parachuting into a place, reading something on the plane. My stuff was maybe a little more nuanced than that. So I would always really try and work out exactly why I'm going, what's the A to Z of the story, and then have at least one decent contact on the ground. Just make it work. Thing is, in those days, it's still today. You find you're going to finance a lot of this stuff yourself. So why waste your money? The more organized you are, the more time you can spend on the story. It's really that simple, right?
But when I look at, say, a story that you did on Timbuktu, and I've been to Mali, but I haven't been to Timbuktu. But
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine it's not it's not as impressive as it looks in your photographs. And looking on your website, I think there's about 25 to 30 photographs. But everyone is, as drummers say, in the pocket. You've really worked each situation. They're not random shots of Timbuktu. Any decent photographer can go to Timbuktu, get a few strong images, come home, and they get a pat on the back for their assignment.
Well, so I read, before I went to Timbuktu, I read a number of books, and I did a story on Tuaregs and Timbuktu at the same time. So a lot of the time I was in Niger, Mali, and a little bit of Mauritania. and then I would come back to Timbuktu and shoot what I could there. But what finessed that for me was, at that time, Al Qaeda in the Maghreb we knew that they were advancing on Timbuktu. We knew that the fundamentalists coming out of Libya, etc., they had designs on Timbuktu. So I knew I had to shoot quickly because I would have to leave. So that again is like very specific, making lists, going, this is what I need. And then pulling a Steve McCurry, just like what Steve does is stand in one place for a week and wait for something amazing to come past. Reading novels about places, reading, travel guides, just really having a sense of like, okay, here's where your pictures might be, rather than just randomly walking around. Yeah, because, for most of us, we don't have a lot of time, yeah. I've been very privileged with Geographic. On average, I've had generally 5 to 6 weeks on a story, which is more than most people get. But what you have to remember is that in those 5 to 6 weeks, I'll probably do 5 countries in the nature of the kind of stories that I do. So you must be organized, man, because otherwise it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to happen. You're going to come back with weak pictures. And I have a terrible fear of failure. I'm really, I'm absolutely haunted by not delivering. So I think a lot of my photography and my persistence in photography is about fear of failure.
I mean, it's a very useful motivator, that.
Yeah, I think so. It's working, works for me, but I don't know how many ulcers I have at this point. But yeah.
One of the main determinants of success in any field is one's ability to deal with stress. How have you learned to keep your stress levels in some kind of manageable state?
So, okay, I work out, I do my meditation, stand on my head, I do all that stuff so that, I can stay calm. And I'm also, I think it's very important to try to be objective, so to stand apart from what you're shooting. I think that helps as well. And there's also, I always think if you're going to go to certain places and you're going to do the kind of work that photojournalists do, then you have to understand right from the beginning, it's not about you. It's about what you're looking at and the people that are consenting to allow you to photograph them or be in the situations where you can make these pictures. So all of those things come first before your own personal feelings, I think. I'm surrounded by examples of people who have experienced more than I have. That's a constant. So you just have to get that in perspective. I remember coming back to SA to photograph Mandela's funeral. And then I ended up covering most of Mandela's funeral with João Silva. Okay, now when João was stepped on that landmine in Afghanistan, I went to see him a couple of times in Walter Reed in Washington, and I think he had more than 70 operations. And so I come to Johannesburg. I'm walking around there like no problems in the world, and here comes João, his first assignment back from those things. From this terrible trauma that's taken a couple of years to recover from. And here he is running around on these prosthetics, keeping up with me doing Mandela's funeral, which is obviously, an iconic event. So perspective, man, really. It's just, for me, you just get your head around the fact that this isn't happening to you. You're just there to document it. So, embrace that.
You also mentioned Jim Nakwe.
I would say that Nakwe has probably played more of a part, as a role model for photojournalists than anyone else. Certainly from our generations as well. I find it very sad when I talk to young photographers these days and they don't know who James Nakwe is. Yeah. That's like, that's just mind blowing to me. Yeah, his moral stance, his dedication, and the quality of his images, the sophistication of his composition, the ability to work in black and white and color, and just the persistence. Look, I think that anyone can make a good picture once. What I respect is journeymen. I respect people who, no matter what, this guy's coming back with something. This woman is coming back with something. That's what I really respect, and that's what I would aspire to. And Nachtwey, yeah, I think for many, many years has been that for most of us. He just makes it simple. This is what it is. This is how you're supposed to behave. This is the standard. Anything else is less. That's Jim.
A lot of photojournalists suggest that the field is pretty much on the way out because there aren't the publications to build one's career to the point where you are a sought-after photographer. How do you feel about that?
I think there's more photographers now than there've ever been. I think digital has really made that happen. Also the number of outlets that are out there has massively increased, but it's whether you get paid for them. That's the big thing. I think our traditional model is failing. There's very few people who can still make a living from editorial photography. Very few. So I just think you have to embrace the fact that you need to be many things, and don't necessarily expect to make your money or to make a long-term living from photojournalism, but invest well. Doing commercial work is vital because it will allow you to do the work that you really care about. Notions that used to be something that was sneered at, you can't afford to do that. So I think to a large extent it's going to come down to how passionate are you? How much do you want to do this? And then people will find a way. Yeah, man, stay loose in terms of the options. That's what I would say.
You've reached this point and you're able to produce work, and now you've got a young family. How many kids do you have?
I have a 7-year-old son. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm divorced right now, and I think a lot of that is probably because of my work. Yeah. Which is just, that's the cliche of our profession. It's there's very few of us who get to really have a family and make that work. Just another hazard of our profession.
Yeah, and there's very few really active photographers operating at the top of the game who manage to get that balance right. And I don't even know if it's possible.
Honestly, I don't know how you do that. I know that I could be twice as busy as I am if I didn't care about my child, but that would make me a lesser human. Yeah. And my boy's important to me. So these are the things they don't talk to you about in journalism school. Even if you are the breadwinner for the family and you have to go out, that still may not be enough in terms of your marriage surviving. So yeah, that's just one thing that I think is not spoken about enough when it comes to what it means to be a photojournalist.
I think all of us have had that challenge on when you make the decision to stay home and when you make the decision to go. But it's a really tough one to pull off, because especially when you operate on a level where you can't just pitch up for a few days, get a few pictures and go back. You're dedicating weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. What I found was that I would, now I shoot something in 2 weeks that I used to take 4 weeks to shoot. But that really requires me drilling down into that subject as much as possible and going, okay, these really are the priority images to make here, and making them as fast as possible. But that's often dictated by circumstances. And if you're lucky enough to have a job and you're working for a prominent publication, they expect your best. So, yeah, look, it's a balancing act. And frankly, I find that much more challenging than the actual photojournalism.
I don't want to keep you any longer because you've been really generous with your time, but I just want to thank you very much for chatting to us.
Hey, Graham, I think you're doing a great job with these shows. I've watched a number of your shows and I've learned something every time. So, I wish you luck keeping on going with that. Huh?
Okay. Thanks, Brent.
All right, Graham, you take care.
The idea in my head that I might not be able to deliver, and just living with that feeling, just having that normal way at you, that's a driving force for most photographers. That's the engine. If anyone could do this, then everyone would be doing it. So, you accept those frustrations as the engine for your career. I pinch myself and think someone will take it away at any moment, but I am obsessed. I do spend most of my time thinking or making pictures. So I guess it's a consequence of obsession more than anything else. And I think that if you really want to make significant pictures, you need to have that mindset.